Be looking at a bunch of different charts, and as you guys know, the CPI has been rising significantly recently. However, there are some very valid arguments that inflation has peaked. So let's hop into the charts. If you guys could, make sure to click that like as well as clicking that subscribe and that bell icon. It would mean the absolute world to me. But without further ado, let's hop into the video. Sorry if the mic sounds off, and sorry for no face cam today. My main computer is currently, it keeps force restarting and it keeps getting a blue screen of death. Anyway, so this idea is not coming straight from me. It's actually coming from John Carter. I watched the video that he made and it made complete sense. So I do want to kind of relay this information, but I want to add my own twist to it. Yeah, so the very first thing, as you guys know, I've been talking about TLT quite a lot in the past. How every time pretty much TLT has broken down, the market has followed besides one time. So as we can see on the daily time frame of TLT, I mean, this thing topped well before SPY did, and every single time it had a bear flag and broke below besides one time, the market ended up following it. So now if we're looking at TLT, a lot of people have been DMing me, oh, TLT's pumping, shouldn't the market be following? So in my opinion, TLT is no longer a leading indicator. So with TLT, basically bonds in general, if inflation is a concern, then people aren't going to go to bonds. However, they will go to bonds if they're worried about recession. So if we pull up TLT and we go back to COVID, look at what happened during that COVID period. Everybody was worried about recession. As we see, TLT shot straight up in price. So right now, because as we're going to talk in this video, well, if inflation is peaking, people aren't really worried about inflation anymore, but recession is still a huge fear. Therefore, if they are worried about recession, they're going to go to the bond. So in my opinion, right now, TLT is not a leading indicator anymore. If anything, you want to pay attention to HYG. I think HYG is the better indicator here. So if we go to a max quarterly chart on HYG, and I noticed this and it looked really, really important. Well, if we're looking at HYG, it's only been down at these levels 2 times, and now we're coming down a 3rd time. So if we're looking at HYG, well, it came down to this level right after the housing crisis. Other than that, HYG came down here during COVID. Well, we're now coming down here a 3rd time. What does that mean? A possible recession. So as we can see, we can take this trend line, this low to this low, project it forward. Possibly we come all the way down here. But again, in the last, what is this, like 14, 15 years, HYG has only been down at these levels during 2 periods of recession. A lot of people are going to argue that COVID wasn't a recession, but literally the entire economy shut down. So from a technical level, no, we did not have 2 negative GDPs in a row that would classify as a recession, but the entire economy shut down. So we already have 1 negative GDP that ended up coming out for Q1. Now we're waiting for Q2, but in my opinion, HYG is going to be the leading indicator from here on out. And I'm not really going to be watching TLT as much. Now, the other thing why I think inflation has peaked, and again, John Carter made this video, so all props to him, is because if we start pulling up charts of like gold, so if we pull up GLD, we can see GLD peaked all the way back here. If we go to wheat futures /ZW, we can see that wheat peaked all the way back here. If we go to corn futures, ZC, we can see that it peaked all the way back here. So now what the argument is all the reports that we are currently getting, CPI, PPI, etc. And sorry if you guys hear background noise, my cat is being ridiculous. But CPI, PPI, and all the inflation data that we are getting, it's all coming from back here when everything was at its highs. So if we're looking at current prices, corn, wheat, gold, silver, copper, coal, etc., well, all of the charts are showing that those things have dropped a substantial amount. So again, we're getting the data pretty much from when these things were at their all-time highs. But if you look at the chart, they're all down substantially from the highs. So what I'm thinking is going to happen is, so when it comes to inflation, we can just kind of take this circle right here. When it comes to inflation, we're kind of going to see something like this, where the inflation is spiking at a rapid pace, and then eventually it's going to start slowing down, and then it's going to come back down. Currently, I think we are probably like here when it comes to the inflation, or maybe even like right here. So what I'm thinking is the next few CPIs, PPIs, and inflation data that we're going to get, it's either going to gradually increase a small amount, or it's going to eventually flatline, and then we're going to start seeing something like this where it ends up dropping and coming back down. So that's the current argument on, is inflation over? Obviously, if you pull up crude oil, that's been a huge factor in the inflation. Yeah, even looking at crude oil, I mean, the data that we're getting is pretty much from when this thing was hitting those highs, and now we're all the way back down here. So that's my take on it. Could I be completely wrong? Of course, but that's just my personal opinion, so we're gonna have to wait and see. Yeah, I just